Hi, this is Mashnu, and here is game 5 of the series of great chess miniatures. Before I start this game, in the previous video that I made of game 4, there were a few mistakes in my comments, and some of you wrote a reaction about that. It's about the moment where I told you that after knight takes h7, the black king was not allowed to retake on h7 because of queen h6 checkmate, but that's of course not checkmate. Then the king can still go back to g8, and well, after that follows queen takes g6. But anyway, it's not very accurate from my side to mention it like this, so I'll try to be more precise this time. I have here a game that was played between the British Grandmaster Chandler, rated 2540. It was played in Kuala Lumpur in 2007 against a player that is not very well known. At least I hadn't heard of him before. He must be an Asian player. I don't know from which country he comes. His name is Mokze Meng, rated 2346. And well, actually, replaying these short games, I've noticed that they not only are entertaining, they also are very instructive, at least if we take our time to go a little bit into depth about where the mistakes were made and how they were punished. And this is one of those games that I find also very instructive. Let's have a look. e4, g6, d4, bishop to g7, knight to c3. So it looks as if this is going to be a modern defense or a period defense, but it transposes into a Caro-Kann defense with c6 on d5. Here the move h3 is played. The idea is to prevent a bishop coming to g4. So knight f6 now, e5, knight to e4. This is a theoretical line. Knight takes e4, d takes e4, and the knight goes to g5. Well, we have seen this idea of knight to g5 targeting f7 in one or two of the previous videos, and this is interesting because we see that this diagonal is open now, because the pawn on d5 is not there any longer. So after c5 here, white plays bishop to c4 already. So targeting f7, putting more pressure on the position of black. Black castles kingside here, and white moves c3 to defend the d4 pawn as good as possible. Black takes on d4, c takes d4, now knight to c6. Very logical idea. This is the weakest point in white's position, so black tries to attack it as many times as possible. Bishop to e3, defending the d4 pawn, and now black moves the move b5, attacks the bishop on c4, and we must be aware that bishop takes b5 is not possible because of queen to a5 check, winning the bishop. So that means that after b5, bishop to b3 must be played, and that's what happened in the game. After this, black played bishop to b7, and here is the point when Chandler started attacking on the king side by playing h3 to h4. The reaction of black was, well, understandable on one hand, but a big mistake. He played the move h6 here, h6 with the idea of chasing away this knight from g5, this attacking knight, and in fact this is a losing move. It loses immediately with white's reaction h5. h5 deserves an exclamation mark. It's a very, very good move. Actually, white wants to open the h file with this. He also threatens a sacrifice on f7, so knight takes f7, rook takes f7, h takes g6, winning the rook. So those kind of threats are there, and here black resigned already. There is no way to save the game, and I did explore this in different variations, looking at, well, is it really that terrible? And yes, I'm convinced. I'm convinced. Well, let's have a look at some of the variations. Well, first of all, let's see what happens if the knight on g5 is taken, so h takes g5. Those are the variations that in a normal game, when we play a tournament game, those are the things that we first must have a look at. What if I accept the sacrifice? Perhaps it's not completely correct, and so that must be examined. Well, in that case here, h takes g6, and the threat is to give a check with the rook on h8, followed by queen to h5. For example, if queen to d7, rook h8 check, bishop takes, and then queen h5, and the threat of checkmate on h7 is impossible to stop. So that's the threat in this position, and there is no way to prevent this. Even something like rook to e8 to make more space for the king doesn't work, because rook h8 check, bishop takes, and then queen h5, and now if king to f8, then queen takes h8 checkmate. So taking the knight brings a big attack for white. And what if black plays here g takes h5? Well, in that case, queen takes h5, and we have the threat of bishop takes f7. For example, well, let's have a look at, for example, e6 to prevent this threat. In that case, knight takes f7. Sorry, knight takes e6. Here, if f takes, then bishop takes check, king goes to h7, and the next piece is involved in the attack. Bishop takes h6. Now the threat is, of course, to retreat the bishop again, giving check and followed by checkmate. So bishop to e3 is a threat. If black wants to prevent this by moving queen to e8, then the queen simply goes to h3. And if the queen goes to g6 now to defend more squares over there, then bishop to e3 check is winning. It's going to be checkmated. So it looks as if it's really true that here there was no way to save the game. Well, the other option, of course, is what if black doesn't take on g5 and doesn't take on h5, but does something completely different. Well, then, for example, rook to c8, things like that. Well, in that case, we can simply take on f7. Knight takes f7. If rook takes f7, then h takes g6, and king moves away, then we take the rook. So we win material, we have a superior position, we are threatening to go to h5, to take on h6, so this is terrible for black. Well, perhaps it's not going to be checkmated within 5 moves, but his position collapses completely. Now what's interesting now is let's go back to the last position to see, okay, what should black have done instead of h6? Because looking at these variations that we just saw, we can now draw the conclusion that h6 is a mistake, because of the pin of this pawn. You know, this pawn is pinned by the bishop, so moving h6 weakens the g6 pawn a lot, because it is practically not longer defended, because this pawn cannot retake there. So, well, that's looking afterwards at the position, or knowing the consequences. We can now think more logically and say, okay, if not h6, what then? Well, one of the options could be to start a counterattack on the queen side with a5. I'm sorry. Here, if white wants to continue his own attack, then there is a4, forcing the bishop to leave this diagonal. bishop to c2, perhaps knight to b4, wanting to trade the bishop for the knight for the bishop, or going to d3 perhaps, things like that. Now let's go back again, because when we put this position in an engine, well, engines, as you know, they'll calculate everything, and they calculate very well. And what the engine finds here is that after h5 and a4, white can sacrifice this bishop on b3 by taking on g6. Now this becomes really, let's say, high level attack, because after h takes g6, queen to g4 follows. The queen is of course going to the h file again, and the same patterns that we saw start arising again. The bishop cannot be taken, because then the same thing happens as before. Check on h8. If bishop takes, now queen to h3 or queen to h4, doesn't matter. The idea is to give checkmate on h7. So if we consider this, we can actually draw the conclusion that a5 is not going to save black as well. Still, there is a better move, and that's knight to a5, so attacking the bishop right away. Actually, with a5, so the previous variation, black needs two moves to attack this bishop, and now with knight to a5, black attacks the bishop in one move. So it forces actually white to make a decision, either to continue his attack or to retreat the bishop. Well, retreating the bishop, then the pressure becomes less, so probably h5 here still is the best move for white. And now black can take on b3. Now taking here is not enough, it's simply too slow. Queen check. If bishop to d2, then knight takes b2, d2, and if king to f1, let's see, h takes g6, then there is a takes b3, queen b6. Interesting, is now queen to g4 still winning, with the same idea as before? Queen to g4. This is getting more and more interesting now. We are missing now this pin, but still we have a strong attack. White hasn't sacrificed anything, and he has a good position. Open h-file, weakness on h7. It looks like this is still winning. Let's see, rook f2, c8. We also have d5 as an attacking move. Rook to h7 is an option. d5 looks very strong, attacking the queen. Queen c7, knight takes f7, e6, all attacking possibilities. This is a very good position for white. Well, let's go back. Let's see if we can find some way to save the game after h4, because if knight to a5 and a5 don't work, what could work? How about h5? h5, very logical move in the sense we stop this pawn from advancing. Perhaps this is the solution. Well, how about g4 now? Continuing the attack, trying to get more pressure. If h takes g4, now h5. The h file is opened again, and if the h file opens, then white has a strong attack, and I think this is what's going to happen here. If h takes g5, then rook takes, and followed by queen takes g4, and we have again this open h-file. So perhaps the main mistake was not h6, perhaps the main mistake was bishop to b7 here. Perhaps this bishop should not have been placed out of play on b7. Perhaps it was needed on f5, bishop f5, then there's g4. Let's have a look. g4, bishop must go to d7. What if right now knight to a5? I'm trying to look for ways to trade a piece that is not very active against one of the attackers. Now this pawn is far away, so moving h4 now, it's I think too slow. Let's have a short look. h4, knight takes b3. Now we have to take on b3. Queen takes b3 or a takes b3. Well, let's see, queen takes b3, because then we pin this f7 pawn. But now we don't have much power here in the attack any longer. If we want to take with the pawn here to be able to play h5, I think this is the solution for black. f6 perhaps. We don't have this pin here any longer. That's important. Knight takes e4. Okay, wait a minute, perhaps we can defend e4. Queen to d5. Queen to d5, defending e4. If now h5, does h6 work now, this time? I think it does, because white cannot take here on g6 this time, because if it takes on g6, we could either retake with the f-pawn, or perhaps, no, this looks very risky again, right? Queen h5, queen h5. Well, we have an escaping route now through f7 and e8. So here, well, queen takes g6. There is bishop f5 now, and we save the game. With so many defenders defending all the squares, the white attack is not going to succeed. So it looks like bishop to b7 was the main mistake. So here bishop b7 was wrong. That's amazing, that already the position of black it looks impossible to hold. Well, this is actually what I meant in the beginning of my video, that if we really take the time to go in depth and examine where it really went wrong, we come to surprising discoveries and interesting investigations. Right? So, well, I'll leave it like this. If you want, you can of course continue trying to find variations in these games, and I'll be back soon with the next episode of this series. Alright, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on YouTube.